Hello and welcome to this, the first in a series of 10 webinars that I'm going to be doing with various vendors talking around the 10 steps to cybersecurity guide that the NCSE has published. This first session is going to be about cyber risk management, and joining me here today we've got Gavin Wood. Okay Gavin, so what is cyber risk management?
Okay, so cyber risk management should be part of your overall business risk management process, but essentially is the process for identifying the various types of cyber threat or risk to your business and then putting in a plan to mitigate against those. And it's all going to be based around your business's appetite for risk, depending on what your business does, what type of data perhaps you hold for your customers. For example, if you have a SaaS platform and you hold, hundreds of thousands of bits of PII data, or you're a manufacturer, how would your business deal? How would you cope within your business if you're unable to do the thing that your business does, right? So if you're a manufacturer and your manufacturing plant went down due to ransomware knocking out your systems, how long would you be able to go before that had, a financial or reputational risk to your business?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so what we need to do is we need to understand the sources of those risks and the types of risks. So the types of risks might be things like ransomware, malware. It could be a malicious third-party hacker type scenario. It could be phishing. It could be data breach, and that could be either deliberate or accidental. It could be insider threat. And then what we need to do is understand the sources of those. So that could be things like your digital supply chain. It could be email in the example of phishing, SMS in the example of smishing, again, which is quite prevalent at the moment. And again, I mentioned insider threats, so it could be an employee trying to exfiltrate data. All of those things. And so the type of threat. And then the source of that, and the overall impact to your business would form the actual risk that you would give against that particular type of threat.
Okay, thanks. So why do we actually need cyber risk management? Can't we just keep it included as part of a risk register or the risk management strategy that the business already has?
Well, going back to my first point, it's a risk assessment. It's all going to be down to your business's appetite for risk, and different businesses are going to have different appetites for particular types of cyber threat and the risk associated with them. However, I would always say that cyber threat or cyber incident should always be on the business risk register, but actually a detailed set of managing risks against the various different types should be done probably separately on a regular basis, because it's probably too broad for a whole business to go through each type of cyber threat. But the cyber threat landscape changes so quickly and evolves very, very quickly that you need to be able to keep on top of the ever-changing landscape.
Absolutely.
So running a separate risk register for cyber threats would probably be a good idea. I very much recommend it. You've got things like changes in operating systems, you've got software that goes out of date, you've got new threats that come, you've got things like zero-day vulnerabilities, all those types of risks need to be managed on an ongoing basis and quite frequently.
So you mentioned there about prioritising risks. Now that might seem self-explanatory, but why do we need to look at risks intelligently and analyse and prioritise them?
Well, there's several different reasons why you prioritise your risks. And again, I'll probably make this point several times, but again, it's all about business appetite for risk and about how much risk your business would be prepared to tolerate. But some risks are more severe than others, and some types of cyber incident are generally more severe than others. So the prioritisation has to come down to the potential impact on your business. As I said earlier, the threat, the potential for damage to your business, whether that be reputation, financial, or whatever, but also how deep is that cyber threat going to go? How big is the bomb crater going to be once that cyber threat has gone off? Okay, so we need to make sure we're prioritising against the biggest and most important threats. What we need to make sure is we're also balancing that priority against, what dare I say, kind of real world events, right?
How credible the risk actually is.
How credible the risk is. Okay, so there's a huge amount of focus given over to zero-day vulnerabilities, but zero-day vulnerabilities actually make up a very, very small amount of threats out there. Although they are important, lots of businesses get breached through the existing holes within their infrastructure and existing gaps in their cybersecurity defences that haven't been filled. So not applying patches promptly, not having the right malware, not having it up to date, not having it deployed across their entire estate. Definitely what I'd call getting the basics right.
Yeah.
That is how businesses are breached, and that's why we need to make sure we've got the right amount of priority or the right priority set across that threat landscape, really. And what we don't want to be doing is just going in and also implementing solutions that are going to try and fill all these things kind of haphazardly, right? We need a structured way to deal with the potential risks. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're putting in systems that give us maximum protection for best value for our business. We want to make sure that we're addressing the IT skills gap. So, we don't want to be implementing solutions that we can't ourselves manage. So looking at partnering with organisations to do that thing, whether that's kind of outsourced SOC or MDR type services. We want to make sure that we're doing all of this business risk management or cyber risk management in a really well structured way.
And I think a key point that you mentioned there was value. Cybersecurity budgets are not unlimited, so I think it's very important that we're actually investing in the areas that represent the biggest credible threat to the businesses, and not just scattergun trying to adopt this because someone said this is a really good solution, but it doesn't really fit a credible risk for our business.
That's right, and and I said it just now, but getting the basics right is so important. So there's no point in you could buy all the tools in the world. You could buy every type of vendor solution that someone's willing to offer you. But if you haven't got the basics right, you've left all the doors and windows unlocked, right? So you've got to get those basics right and build on top of that with your risk management.
Cool, thank you. So how do you actually identify cybersecurity risks?
So again, looking at that business appetite for risk, what is your business's crown jewels? Okay, if you're a company that invests heavily in IPR, then that might be your crown jewels. Okay,
Yes.
if you're as I said earlier, a SaaS platform processing hundreds of thousands of elements of personal data for people, then protecting that personal data has got to be top of your priority list. If you're a manufacturing industry, being able to manufacture the widgets that you do has to be your top priority. So protecting that infrastructure is going to be at the top of your list for the cyber risk management. So you're looking at things like your data, your servers, your infrastructure, your users, your people within your systems. And what I would do is I'd use a framework for doing that. So, and there are lots of frameworks available for identifying risk. The Monitor Attack framework, for example. One of the best ones out there that everyone should be adopting as a minimum is the Cyber Essentials framework.
Absolutely.
Okay, so going back to getting the basics right, the Cyber Essentials framework guides you in getting those basics right, and the Cyber Essentials Plus builds on top of that. But as a great place to start, that is a really good methodology for getting those basics right and making sure that you're kind of covering all the areas. And on top of that, I would start layering other solutions. And you can go to things like ISO 27001, for example, or others to kind of give you more reassurance, or again, depending on your appetite for risk or your customers' requirements, you build on top of that set of basics.
Cool.
I'd also start looking at, in terms of identification, I'd start looking at things like security testing. So assuming I've got the basics right, I'd then be looking to actually test that. And that might be starting with something as simple as a vulnerability assessment, just checking my external infrastructure to make sure there's no holes, there's nothing that's been missed, and then doing that on a regular basis to make sure that any of the work I'm doing maybe on my infrastructure isn't leaving anything open to attack. And then as my security maturity increases, and I get further up the stack in terms of applying frameworks and controls, then I'd probably evolve that testing into something that was more akin to things like penetration testing, kind of ultimately culminating in something like maybe a red team test when I was kind of fully mature in what I would call my kind of security maturity. And most businesses are on that journey somewhere.
Okay, cool. So what do you think are the most important elements then with regards to identifying risks?
Well, certainly getting the basics right, using that framework approach to knock off things like, one of the biggest things, and I see this a lot, is knowing what's knowing what's on your estate. Okay, so
Absolutely,
if you can't see it, you can't manage
you don't
it.
know about it.
Yeah, and if you can't manage it, then it's not being, it's not being patched. You don't know if it's on the right operating system. You don't know if it's got your anti-malware deployed on it. And these are the things that are going to come along and bite you, when there's a cybersecurity incident. That's where people will get in. The places that you're not looking are the places where cyber incidents will happen. So getting the basics right, is incredibly important. know your estate, really, really, really important. Patch, anti-malware, and then start securing the perimeter to make sure that you're kind of protecting your environments. Now, obviously, that perimeter is kind of disappearing with the way infrastructure is going at the moment. SaaS platforms working from home as well. So when I say securing the perimeter, I'm also talking about things like kind of zero trust technologies. And I wouldn't necessarily go out and buy a ZTNA solution right now, but what I want to do is pick the elements that are appropriate to my business and making sure that I'm layering that defence.
There's a lot of different solutions out there, all very, very different, all brandishing the moniker of zero trust. And it can sometimes be difficult to understand what that actually means, but I think you hit the nail on the head there, that you have to be adopting a zero trust methodology that is appropriate to your business, how your users work and how you transact business. So what about financial risks that are associated with cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we've talked quite a lot about the technical aspects of a cyber incident, but obviously, and the results of those are, things like you might not be able to manufacture, or your machines might get locked out due to ransomware. So that's the technical aspects, but obviously there is a financial impact to that. So that could be, again, going back to the manufacturing example, if you're not able to manufacture your widgets for X many days, how long is it going to be before you're financially impacted? If you are processing large amounts of PII data, then that has to be reported to the ICO. Any sort of data breach or any cyber incident has to be reported within a certain time frame. And then there's action taken based, off the back of that, depending on the severity of that incident and how you're mitigating it. So there's potential ICO fines. There's the loss of opportunity to your business, not able to actually function. There's reputational risk as well. So if you're a trusted supplier of a business, which one of the things I think is most important, if you're a trusted supplier of a business and you have a severe data breach, are people going to trust you to process their data going forward? And then, so not only have you had maybe a fine, but you've also then had loss of revenue through customers terminating their services with you or not renewing their services, given that damage to your reputation. So yeah, absolutely, there's the technical risk and the technical damage to your business, but the financial side can be huge. And we've seen some really big fines dealt out by the ICO, especially around GDPR, that type of thing.
Thank you. So, how do we actually go about identifying cyber security risks?
So I talked earlier on about security testing. So that would be one way. So everything from vulnerability scan through to pen testing. Know what's going on in your estate. So taking an independent view of your security state will tell you where your vulnerabilities are.
Yeah.
Then we need to look at other types of risks. So risks from inside of threat. Are you carrying lots of sensitive information? If you are, how are you segmenting that within your network? Are you using good access control? Are you using the least privileged access? So only making sure that the people have access to do the job that they need, rather than having full access to the network. Not only is that a risk to your getting access to data that shouldn't be accessed, but obviously it's also a potential vector for a cybersecurity incident. If someone's got domain admin and they shouldn't have it, that's an account that can be compromised and take down the entire network.
So how do we actually prioritise the risks that we identify from various cybersecurity threat sources?
So I would, there's several ways of doing it. There's the risk assessment approach. So looking at the impact, the criticality of the incident, the financial risk. So creating a matrix that gives you a score. So scoring each risk, giving it a combined score, and then addressing the ones that have the highest business impact risk first.
And again, we're back talking around priority here. This is how we actually identify these are the highest priority ones.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are also things like CVSS scores. Okay, so when you have something like a penetration test, or you find a vulnerability within your network, those are given an industry score. Okay, and those industry scores will determine how easy that exploit is to be triggered, whether that's able to be triggered externally or whether you have to be on the device. So that's an industry standard metric for identifying the severity of a particular type of vulnerability. Now that vulnerability may exist, although it's slightly different to it being a risk because one is a vulnerability and one is the risk of that vulnerability being exploited. But obviously, the more of those vulnerabilities you have, the higher that your exposure to cybersecurity risk is.
Absolutely. So it's not all about just doing the high priority CVSS things, but looking at, if you've got lots and lots of moderate ones, that still represents a significant problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So you definitely want to. So if you had a list with a few red high priority risks and lots and lots of mediums, you want to knock off those reds as quickly as possible. But you really do need to focus on that big chunk of I suppose, for example of this conversation, medium risks, because lots of cybersecurity incidents are caused by vulnerabilities that are already out in the network, they're already out in the wild, they're already being exploited. And if the more exposure you have, the more risks or holes in your network or vulnerabilities you have, the more likely you are to experience a cyber threat or a cyber risk, being realised, and something happening within your network.
So the threats from vulnerabilities is a significant risk in any business, and gives a good example of how we prioritise risks. But with other risks, what is the best way to do it? Do we do things that are just important, or things that are urgent, or what's the best way to actually prioritise the risks once we've assessed them?
Well, I'd put them in the priority list I'd create would be the ones that are the most important, the ones with the highest risk, the ones that are easily exploitable. Get those at the top of the list. Make sure those ones are dealt with first. That's going to be top of your priority list. Get those dealt with, get those done, and then I would create a plan for mitigating the rest of the risks over a period of time. And going back to it's kind of the premise of this sort of whole conversation, it's about risk management.
Yes.
So not necessarily vulnerability management, but risk management. So it's again down to the appetite of risk for for mitigating against all of these particular types of threats. So you might have a very, very long list, but your budget might be particularly constrained. So again, what you want to be able to do is investing where you're going to get, the best level of risk for the best investment that your budget is going to afford. Using a tool using a set of tools that are going to cover as many of those risks off. With the best investment and the maximising value for your organisation is going to be particularly important. And then, going back to that matrix of impact versus urgency, and looking at where are my priorities, what do I need to focus on next? Do I need to go to my board and get more budget? Because I've got a proven high priority risk, or something that's going to be potentially exploited, in the wild, that's on my network that I need to deal with instantly. And again, having that plan allows you to knock those risks off and bring your risk profile down.
Okay, cool. So, and I think there's also lots of different risk methodologies out there, isn't there? So sometimes it's not appropriate to just use one, or there's certain methodologies that may lend themselves more to different types of risk scenario. But it's also a useful way to cross-check the risks and make sure that you're prioritising them correctly, because if they're coming up as high priority in both of the methodologies, it's a safe bet that that's one of the ones that you really need to be looking at most.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can also use visualization aids and stuff like that, which sometimes can make it quite clear where the biggest risks are actually going to lie.
Yeah, certainly. And if you're looking to mitigate those, and you need to get sponsorship for actually doing that, or funding for doing that, then that's a really great way of demonstrating where the risks to your business are.
Brilliant. That kind of brings us to the end, Gavin. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate you're a very busy man, and hopefully that's been enlightening and informative for everyone. Please do reach out to Chess if you want a hand with doing some risk assessments yourself.
Thanks, Adam. It was great.
So that brings us to the end of this first webinar. I hope you found it informative. Just as a final thought around cyber risk management, Gartner predicts that by 2025, 60% of organisations will use cybersecurity risk as the primary determinant in conducting third-party transactions and business engagements. So cyber risk management is something that we all need to be using moving forwards, at looking now and into the future. If you want some help with doing risk assessments of your organisation, or indeed to run through and get a feel for what the cybersecurity posture of your organisation is, head over to our website and take the free cybersecurity posture assessment. And we will see you in the next webinar, which is going to be talking around engagement and training.
Thanks a lot.